You've seen the video. Keanu Reeves, secret Christian, makes a famous actor weep on live TV. Millions believe it. There's just one problem. Every word of it is fake, and the truth underneath the lie is stranger than the lie.
And then, when I worked on Little Buddha and got introduced to Buddhism, I'm not a Buddhist, but, to start to think about in those ways and to think about impermanence.
While the internet invented a Christian out of a man who calls himself a Buddhist, the real ones were hiding in plain sight. Household names reading scripture every morning before the world wakes up. We're counting down 9, in their own words, on the record. The Oscar winner who spent 40 years struggling for his own soul. The comedy star who walked away from $12 million rather than curse on camera. The tough guy whose secret weapon is the Book of Job. And by the end, you'll see why the story they faked about Keanu was the wrong one all along. First, let's kill the myth for good. The clips are everywhere. Keanu reads the Bible in secret. His testimony brought a co-star to tears. Keanu found Jesus. None of it happened. That tearful on-air baptism story was manufactured for clicks. Go to what Keanu himself has actually said, on camera, and you get something very different. Asked point blank what he believes, he didn't reach for scripture. His words, "I'm not saying that I'm an atheist. I'm not saying that I'm not a believer. I really don't know." His deepest spiritual roots trace to Buddhism, not the Bible. So no, Keanu doesn't read scripture every morning. But while that fake story pulled millions of views, the people who actually live it were hiding in plain sight. Let's meet them. Number 9 is a man you'd never put in the same sentence as the word gentle. You know him as Mr. T, the gold chains, the mohawk, the growl. I pity the fool. And every morning before anyone sees that face, he prays the same prayer, not for strength to lift 500 pounds, but, in his words, "Give me strength, Lord, so when I speak, my words might motivate, might inspire somebody. When they see me, let them see you."
I don't forget that. And that's why it's not that God blessing me. I take food and stuff back to other families, not grandstanding. I say, God, bless me so I could be a blessing to others.
But here's where it gets real. In 1995, he was hit with a rare cancer, T-cell lymphoma. Instead of breaking, he opened his Bible to the Book of Job, the story of a man God lets be tested to the breaking point, and read it through every round of chemo, deciding his suffering was his own test, so one day he could sit with dying kids and mean it. Look at the word testimony, he says. The first 4 letters spell test. Number 8 spent 9 seasons as America's most exasperated sitcom mom, 2 Emmys for it. Then, in her 60s, Patricia Heaton admitted something her Christian fans assumed she'd done decades ago. She had never read the Bible all the way through, not once. So she committed to a 1-year plan and ground through it daily, checking off a paper guide worn down to a tiny thread. Some days were a slog. Then she hit the final chapter of John and broke down crying. Not from the obvious part. What got her was something petty. Peter, just told he'll be martyred, points at another disciple and basically asks, "Well, what about him?" And it sounded exactly like the 2 grown brothers bickering on her own sitcom. That's when it clicked. Nobody inventing a fake religion would make their heroes look that foolish, that human. The flaws are what convinced her it was true.
I think I wasn't doing that, and I think God was withholding everything until she made sure that he was the center of my life.
Number 7 was, for a moment, the highest-paid actor in Hollywood, Chris Tucker, the motor mouth from the buddy cop blockbusters, and his faith cost him a fortune, literally. After his breakout, he was offered between $10 and $12 million to reprise one of his most famous roles in a sequel. He said no, not for a better deal, for God. After a born-again conversion, he'd decided he would no longer curse or smoke on camera, so he walked away from 8 figures. That's not a rumor. His co-star Ice Cube confirmed it. He turned us down for religious reasons. Tucker rebuilt his whole act around staying clean. Most comics, he says, reach for the easy stuff, the cursing, the raunch, while he has to dig deeper to find something still funny and still clean. And every day, he prays for whoever's in the White House, any party, that they'll do the right thing. Number 6 treats prayer less like church and more like a daily audit of his own soul. Matthew McConaughey, Oscar winner, raised Methodist in Texas, calls his morning prayer an inventory. He stops time. He strips off every label, movie star, husband, father, even American, until there's nothing left but, in his words, a child of God.
First off, I want to thank God, because that's who I look up to. He's graced my life with opportunities that I know are not of my hand or any other human hand.
From there, he reviews who he's wronged, who to forgive, what to release. But the shock is how far he'd go to hear God clearly. At the height of his early fame, drowning in money and noise, he didn't check into a resort. He packed a bag and vanished into the mountains of Peru, alone, for 22 days, a trek he describes as one unbroken prayer.
I remember the first trip to Peru is right after I got famous after A Time to Kill.
22 days of walking, until his head and his heart lined back up. Number 5 is the man the internet turned into a god of toughness. The Chuck Norris jokes practically invented early internet humor. But the real Chuck Norris will tell you that at the peak of all that fame, he was hollow. I was always angry, and I had a huge hole in my heart. Nothing made me happy. What changed him wasn't a sermon. It was his wife Gina who started reading the Bible aloud in their home every morning. For a while he just listened. Then she asked if he wanted to read along, and it became the spine of his whole life. The moment it turned from habit into Lifeline came in a hospital. When Gina went into early labor with their twins and the complications turned life-threatening, Norris found that none of it, not the millions, not the fame, not a roundhouse kick, could save the people he loved. Stripped bare, he surrendered. That morning, reading is the wall he built, so he'd never feel that empty again. Number 4 might be the loudest believer on this list, and he earned the right the hardest way. Chris Pratt now stops his millions of followers mid-scroll to pray with them out loud, straight from the Psalms. Be still and know that I am God. Then he tells them to put the phone down and find some peace, but that boldness was forged in the worst night of his life. In 2012, his son Jack was born 9 weeks early, 3 pounds, 10 ounces, and rushed into intensive care, fighting to survive. Pratt, who'd spent years making promises to God and breaking them, had nothing left to bargain with but prayer. When Jack pulled through, he said something that stuck. His heart softened and his faith hardened. From that room on, he refused to ever again be ashamed of what he believed, no matter how hard the industry rolled its eyes. The man leading prayers to millions today was built in a neonatal ICU, begging. Number 3 is where this list stops being inspiring and turns almost unbearable. You know Gary Sinise as Lieutenant Dan, and as the man who's given decades to wounded veterans. What you don't know is how he found his faith, or what it costs him now. It started in a hurricane. Driving through a screaming storm, his wife Moira, who had no faith at all and was quietly drowning in alcoholism, turned to him out of nowhere and said she was going back to the Catholic Church and putting their kids in Catholic school. He thought she'd lost it, but she got sober in a church basement, and watching her come back to life pulled him in too. That's the beginning. Here's the part that breaks you. In 2024, Gary's son Mac died of a rare spinal cancer. Mac had been a devout Catholic who underlined every verse that gave him strength as his body failed. And today, Gary reads his daily scripture out of his dead son's Bible, following Mac's own underlines. When I sit and read some of the things, it's like Mac just telling me stuff. It's like messages. Number 2 has the most punishing routine on this list, and it has nothing to do with the gym. Mark Wahlberg's alarm goes off at 2:30 in the morning, and the first thing he does, before the weights, before anything, is get on his knees in the dark and pray. 20 minutes, prayer book and devotionals, every day. His line is blunt. I take 2 days a week off from the gym. I don't take a day off from getting on my hands and my knees. He takes weekly mass so seriously that productions schedule around it. Now remember who's saying this. The same Mark Wahlberg who, as a teenager in Boston, was a violent street kid with a record, the last person anyone would have bet on. and he won't take the credit. Everything good that has happened to me in my life happened when I started focusing on my faith. The discipline you see in his body is just the shadow of the discipline he does before sunrise. Which brings us to number 1, the man that fake Keanu's story was always reaching for and never going to find. Denzel Washington, 2 Oscars, 40 years at the very top, the son of a Pentecostal preacher and arguably the most respected actor alive. And here is the confession that should stop you cold. Standing in front of a packed room, Denzel admitted that underneath all of it, every award, every record, he had spent his whole career, the full 40 years, struggling for my own soul. Not the press tour version, the real thing. He says the higher you climb, the more fame works like a monster that magnifies whatever's already broken in you, and without an anchor, it drags you into depression. So every morning he reads scripture, prays, and leans on a devotional to, as he puts it, fill the bucket back up before the world starts chipping away at it. And when he prays, the same answer keeps coming back. In every prayer, all I hear is, feed my sheep. Think about that. The most powerful actor on earth, treating his fame as spiritual warfare. Convinced God didn't hand him all of it to keep, but to give away. That's the real story. Not a man the internet pretended found God, a man who spent 40 years on his knees, telling you he's still fighting for his soul. Now be skeptical for a second. You should be. Hollywood loves a redemption arc. Faith sells. A celebrity prayer app partnership is, let's be honest, also a business deal. You could argue every name here found God right about the time it got good for the brand. The cynics aren't crazy, but here's what's hard to wave away. Nobody's filming Mark Wahlberg at 2:30 in the morning. No camera was rolling when Gary Sinise opened his dead son's Bible. These are private habits, kept for decades, by people who already hold every reward the world can give. They didn't need more, and they did it anyway. Alone, in the dark, when there was nothing left to gain. So what do you actually believe? Are these the most successful people on the planet quietly admitting that all the money and fame in the world couldn't fill the hole, that they needed something older and bigger to survive the lives they built? Or is faith just the one luxury even the rich have to fake? Tell me in the comments. And if this showed you a side of these people the internet never let you see, hit like and subscribe. Because the truths the famous keep quietest are exactly the ones we go digging for next.